thank you so much for setting this up. I definitely want to thank the people at Weber Grill and our friends from Sun King Brewing, the best beer in the world, not only for brewing said beer, but for sharing it with us. Let me introduce everybody that's up here. I'll start from your right. This is Greg Bedard of the Boston Globe. You're still the Boston Globe, right? This is Mike Tanier from Sports on Earth. Matt Miller, draft guru from Bleacher Report. Peter King from SportsIllustrated.com. Sports Illustrated. This is Doug Farrar from Yahoo Sports, the Shutdown Corner. And of course, Indianapolis is owned by Chappell, beat writer and columnist from the Indianapolis Colts. So the reason this works is because so many people have questions. So all of you are going to ask questions. We've got a microphone over here. I'll point to you when it's time. We've also got our friends at Google and Google Plus are doing the Hangout. This is being broadcast live to the world, which is kind of scary, and I just beat my hand. Which really worries me because I'm standing behind you. So we're also going to have questions from Google. We've got a number of people from all over the U.S. and the world on that. So to get this started off, I'm going to ask Peter King a question. Peter, where's Manti Te'o going to go, and what has the process been like for him here in Indianapolis?
Manti Te'o this year, I think I've been coming to the Combine, I guess, about 15 years. And today's scene with Manti Te'o was easily the most sort of the craziest scene I've seen involving a player. Gil Brandt, who's been to every Combine, sort of the godfather of the NFL, looked over the scene and he said, this is 30% bigger at least than the Tebow story, a few years ago when Tebow came into the NFL. So, and I thought Te'o handled himself well. He was very, I was looking at him and I said, and I know everybody's got an opinion about Te'o and what happened, but I said, what an innocent kid. That's what he looked like to me. But anyway, my feeling is that there's one team in this draft that is praying for Manti Te'o to sink like a stone and to screw up all these 15-minute interviews he has in the next couple of nights over at the Players Hotel, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens would love him to plummet all the way down to the end of the first round, and they would like to team him, I believe, long-term with a guy who they're going to seek in free agency if it's Walmart free agency, and that's Ray Maualuga of the Bengals. So, I think he's definitely going to get picked before then unless something strange happens, because I think NFL teams are going to have 8 weeks poke and prod into his life, and they're going to say the biggest thing this kid has going against him is that he's naive. Anyway, Will has left the building.
I'm still
Will,
here.
do you want to take a question, or should we ask a couple of questions here, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's take the first question from the floor. Who wants to be the first one?
I believe Mike 6 has a question.
Mike 6.
Go ahead. Mike's right over there. See, you're right over there.
I got nothing.
Way to go, Mike.
You're up. No, I know that.
Well, then Angie has a question. Give her the microphone.
That's precious.
Thanks. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about how much it's changed if you're a sports writer, as opposed to the off season? Is there an off season? And yeah.
Why don't we do Greg Bedard? Go ahead. Is there an off season anymore, Greg?
No. And now that we've got a couple more participants, before we jump into that, let me introduce on the left Kurt Greer from NFL Network. And over here, the guy with a couple Twitter followers. No, excuse me, a couple million Twitter followers. That's Adam Schefter from ESPN.
Hey, Will, if I could suggest something, I knew who was coming here tonight, and I thought of a couple of questions for each person. Do you mind if we just go rapid fire up here?
No, go right ahead.
All right, good. I'm going to start with Albert Greer, who's covered the NFL for a long time and now works for NFL Network. And so what I'd like to do here is just go sort of rapid fire. We'll have a lightning round, all questions. We'll just go quickly. But Albert, give me your view on what player in free agency. Maybe it's Mike Wallace. Maybe it's Jake Long. Maybe it's Dwayne Bowe. Who knows? What player in free agency, in your opinion, is going to hit it the richest?
I think Jake Long, because it's so rare that a top shelf, and I know that there are a number of tackles out there. It's so rare that that type of tackle hits the market. Almost never happens. And there are a couple teams out there with needs, Arizona, Chicago. So I think Jake Long will be up there. And if there's one that I think that'll get maybe richer than a lot of other people think he would, it'd be Paul Kruger from the Ravens, who Baltimore's going to let him walk. They drafted Courtney Upshaw to replace him last year. And it's another one of those. Left tackles generally don't hit the market, and young pass rushers also rarely hit the market. So I think Kruger's going to surprise some people with the haul that he brings in. Michael Johnson will be the other one if he hits the market. But I guess
Michael Johnson, the defensive end for the Bengals. Let's move to Greg Bedard. Greg, I'll ask you, I'm going to give you two names, and you tell me which name the New England Patriots are most likely to sign in free agency. One, Ed Reed. Two, Dwight Freeney.
Dwight Freeney. And I know that'll
Can you imagine Dwight Freeney, a Patriot?
I actually think they're okay at safety with Devin McCourty, and I think they think Tavon Wilson, second-round pick from last year, can make the jump to year two. What they need is they need another pass rusher in the mix. And I know there's a lot of respect on the Patriots coaching staff for Dwight Freeney, even though he's had some injury problems the past couple of years. And he actually hasn't played that well against the Patriots the past 2 years. But I would say Dwight Freeney's the guy that they go after.
I'm going to go to Mike Tanier of Sports on Earth, and many of you may be a little bit surprised to know that when you look at this table right now, the third guy in from your right was Joe Flacco's high school calculus teacher. Is that right?
That is correct. I taught Joe Flacco everything he knows about
And that is, you know what? And Mike is the reason why Joe Flacco is a quarterback today and not
An engineer.
a high school calculus teacher.
Mike, how often does he actually have to use calculus?
To count the monies when we get Yes, large number theory is about the only thing he needs at this point.
Tell us a story from high school teaching Joe. What was he like then?
If you know Joe Flacco's personality now, it's a little bland, it's a little dry, he's not the most exciting guy. In high school, he was exactly like that. He has not changed in any way. A very mellow guy. And the thing that I remember most while he was in my class, he did very well. It's an amazing thing to go to a high school game in a little suburban town and see a 6'4" kid throw the ball 65, 70 yards downfield. It was amazing for me to watch, and it was amazing for the opposing coaches and cornerbacks to watch as those balls sailed over their heads for touchdowns.
Let's go over to Mike Chappell of the Indianapolis Star. Mike, I think people probably in Indianapolis and elsewhere were a little bemused or confused by the cutting of Dwight Freeney when they didn't need to do that, or basically telling him that they weren't going to sign him. What do you think the Colts' plan is in free agency? Bob Kravitz, come on in. There's stairs over here. Bob Kravitz, columnist, Indianapolis Star, is on his way up.
We've got Bob just showed up, Sean Jensen just got up, Bears just showed up as well.
But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Their plans to be one of those teams that tries to overpay for Paul Kruger. When you get a chance to get a young, 27, 28, pass rusher looking for his first big contract. Again, with Dwight Freeney, he's 33, just turned 33. His best years are behind him. If he goes to New England or somewhere, he's going to have 2 pretty good years, 3 years maybe. But the Colts need to replace Freeney.
They're going to replace Freeman. Their biggest concerns are offensive tackle, corner, and pass rusher. So maybe they'll overpay for Jake Long, they'll overpay for Paul Kruger, but they will overpay for somebody.
Adam Schefter, how are you? Good. Tell me, just give me a guess, a gut feeling. Tell me your big surprise in free agency. Tell me either a player who you think is going to be richer than any of us think, or a team that steps out and spends money that you think will be a surprise.
It's a great question. I think, I know Albert mentioned Jake Long on the offensive line, but I happen to think that Mike Wallace is going to really hit it biggest here in the free agent period. I think there are some teams that are concerned about Jake Long and the injuries he has, whereas Mike Wallace is this young player with rare speed who seldom hits the market. And I know the teams don't like to overpay certain players at certain positions, but with the teams out there like Miami and Cleveland, St. Louis that have a need at the wide receiver position, I think Mike Wallace is going to crush it big. And to give you a surprise free agent teams, I still think that we're going to see the market flooded with a lot more players who haven't been cut yet. So we're going to see a lot more blood on the street. The class of free agents that we're looking at now is going to be expanded by a lot, and it's going to shake up the entire equation. And so I'm hesitant to comment on a team or a player because I don't.
You're not sure what the whole pool is going to be yet.
Other than it's going to be greatly expanded.
Let's go, Matt Miller, you've been studying the draft, and I think this draft is going to be very strange because I call it sort of the blue-collar unknown draft. You could put pictures of the top 5 guys who are going to be picked in the draft, including assuming that either Geno Smith or Matt Barkley is not going to be one of them. But you can put pictures of the top 5 guys up, and 95% of the people in here are not going to know that one of them is Luke Jokel. You know, they're not going to know who Dean Milliner is or anything like that. But tell me, in your mind, who's going to be the big surprise riser in the first round? Who's going to go higher than people think?
I think the guy everyone has to keep their eye on is Tank Carroll from Florida State. He's a defensive end who got hurt this year, but it was the most explosive defensive end on a team that had Bjorn Werner, who a lot of people consider a top 5 pick, and Brandon Jenkins, who was probably a first-rounder last year. So as long as Carradine's healthy and all the reports are good, he's the guy who's going to start running soon. I'm sure Will knows quite a bit.
Carradine's going to be good.
Tank Carradine would probably be the name that I think most people standing out in the crowd are like, who are you talking about? And he's going to be a high pick and probably the most complete defensive end pass rusher in this year's class.
If I can jump in, Peter, we've got a question from the crowd for everybody.
Good. Let's have a crowd question.
Hi. My question is, can you pick a player from the AFC and the NFC who you think is going to be a big breakout player in the next season?
Will, I'm sorry, can we pick a player?
One player from the AFC and one player from the NFC that you think is going to have a breakout season next year.
All right, I'm going to give that to Doug Farrar. Doug, you know things. Come on, predict things right now.
I think Eric Decker of the Broncos is going to have 120 catches for about 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns next year. That's my AFC. NFC. You know, I'm going to go off the reservation here. I think this is the year the Carolina Panthers remember that they have Mike Tolbert.
Yeah.
He's going to score 12 touchdowns.
Okay. Adam Schefter has an opinion. Here it comes.
Yeah, I'm going to go in the NFC with Isaiah Peet, a second-round draft pick, a running back in St. Louis, that I believe is going to be a big factor next year.
Because you think that Steven Jackson is not going to be on the Rams next year?
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
is Steven? Let me ask you this question about Steven Jackson. Will Steven Jackson, of his own volition, want to go out there and see if either A, he can exceed the $7 million he's supposed to make this year in the Rams, or B, play for a contender next year?
I would be shocked if he makes the $7 million that he thinks he can make, because I don't think running backs get paid, particularly backs at that age, even as good and talented as he is. And I think he wants to get paid. But my AFC breakout player, I'm going to go with Emmanuel Sanders, the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. And I go back to one guy telling me at one point, Mike Wallace, Julio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders in there. They told me that Emmanuel Sanders is the fastest and best of those receivers, but that he can't stay healthy. With Mike Wallace leaving, and with everybody focusing on Antonio Brown, I'll put Emmanuel Sanders plus out next year.
Okay,
That's pretty good stuff.
there's another microphone. Bob, here, hold that thing.
Let's get a question from our Google.
Google land. Come on, Google.
And we've got a question from Chase Hines. He's in New York City. What's your question, Chase?
Yeah, we just talked about the Carolina Panthers. I'm a huge fan from Charlotte, so I wanted to see what direction you guys thought they should go in this draft in the first round.
Let's go to Matt Miller for that one. Matt, where should the Carolina Panthers go in the first round of this draft?
I think they can go a couple areas, but chiefly defense and probably a pass rusher. I mean, you have Charles Jensen on one side, but this is a team who needs help at defensive tackle. They tried that a few years ago, picking two of them in the third round, and one of those guys didn't pan out. So I think you go into those two positions, and it's a good year for that because there's a lot of pass rushers at end, at defensive tackle. So sitting here before free agency, at least, I think that's an obvious need for the Panthers.
That means, though, Chase, that Ron Rivera is going to have to learn how to pronounce that star guy's name because none of us can do that right now.
If he can fly to us, I'd be happy.
Last question before we get to the Honorable Robert Kravitz.
John, go ahead.
We've got another Google Plus question from John Hillard in Atlanta. What do you got, John?
Hey, I'm here. I've always lived in the South, and I think a lot of Southerners saw Marcus Lattimore go down earlier this season. And I think if you've been watching college football at least 10 years, you had to think back to Willis McGahee doing the same thing against Ohio State in the national championship game about 10 years ago. And he obviously went on to have a very productive NFL career. And I read where Lattimore did actually come to the combine and went through a pretty rigorous physical, and a lot of doctors looked at him, and a lot of teams were there to analyze it. I'm just curious to know what the general feel is about him and how productive he can be.
Let's go to Albert Breer on Lattimore.
Well, what you hear on him is his injury is more serious than McGahee's, and it's probably more of a question of whether or not he's going to be ready in 2013. I think because he's had a series of knee injuries, it's a little bit different than McGahee. But I can tell you this, that if he had come out after his freshman year, and I asked the executive about this earlier this week, if he had been able and allowed to come out after his freshman year, he would have been a first-round pick without a question. And, so it's a gamble. Could you wind up with another Willis McGahee? Frank Moore is another player who had multiple knee injuries in college. And those are certainly stories out there that would make you think that he can do it. It's a matter of when you're going to get the return. It might not be in 2013.
Here's one of the reasons, and I hear the same thing about Lattimore. It's one of the reasons why people get so nutty when you start talking about a surgery. When we talk about Darrelle Revis, everybody says, oh boy, is he still going to be good? It's an ACL. People recover from ACLs in 10 minutes.
Hold on, Peter.
Yeah.
I got to stop you on Revis.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. There has never been a defensive back that has come back to 100% from an ACL.
I'll tell you what. I will bet you a VMAC this year that on the Pro Football Focus ratings, which we all know are biblical, I guess, that Darrelle Revis will come back and be the top-rated cornerback in football this year. You want to put a little WEMAC on that?
I will take a WEMAC on that, but I've got a question from a gentleman that came all the way from England.
Hi guys, where's Louis Vasquez going to go?
Where's what?
Louis Vasquez going to go in free agency.
Where's Louis Vasquez going to go in free agency? Come on, Neil Hornsby, tell us where Louis Vasquez is going in free agency.
Go to the Indianapolis Colts.
All right, that's Neil Hornsby from Pro Football Focus with a bold prediction. Doug Farrar, you had a comment about Lattimore. Go right into the thing.
Yeah, Chris Brown going back to the Titans 7 or 8 years ago. Ran really high. Didn't get down, got hurt all the time. When I watch Lattimore on tape, it kind of reminds me of that. It's not just the severity of the injuries, it's not the multiplicity of the injuries. But I think his running style, which is high and inside, as opposed to Eric Dickerson, who is high and out of bounds a lot, I think his winning style leads itself to injury. As a kid, as a person, you root for him like crazy, but I think he's going to have a history of this stuff, even if he recovers from knee injury, and even James Andrews was talking about that. I love him as a kid, but I had real concerns.
One other note about Lattimore. Frank Gore has had left knee reconstruction, right knee reconstruction, and he's had both shoulders operated on. And he's a big reason why the 49ers won the Super Bowl this year. Adam Schefter, I believe, has a comment.
The 49ers have 14 picks. So if there's a team that's going to gamble a late-round pick on Marcus Lattimore, have him sit out next year and be able to do it, it would be the 49ers.
I like that a lot. Now, and Will?
Yeah.
Will?
Yes.
We're now going to invite Bob Kravitz to join the festivities.
Awesome.
Everybody here knows Bob. He's a columnist for the Indianapolis Star. And we're very glad, by the way, to have Bob with us because he almost went to the big hockey rink in the sky a few weeks ago. Bob actually played a hockey game while having a heart attack. Bob is what you call an idiot. But anyway,
please tell me
he's
your
idiot. Anyway, Bob, I have a question that I've wanted to ask you ever since November. All right, here's the question. Would the Indianapolis Colts have gone 11-5 and made the playoffs without the Chuck Pagano phenomenon?
I don't believe so. And that's why I think next year they could be a better football team and not have as good a record. And Mike Chappell and I have spoken about that. I think theoretically they could be a 9-7, 10-16, even 8-8 with a better roster. I don't think you can underestimate the impact that Chuck's illness had on this team, and that's not to diminish Chuck's ability to coach in any way, shape, or form. But to watch this team the way they were galvanized by Chuck's illness and the fight that they produced as they saw him fighting for his life in the hospital, I believe that they overachieved based on their roster. I didn't think they had a playoff roster, but they overachieved and did some amazing things. And I'll tell you what, it was a hell of a lot of fun to cover, as I'm sure it was fun to watch.
Let's take a quick question from our friends at Google, and it is Macy from State College, Pennsylvania.
Hi, how are you? All right, so I'm a huge Giants fan, and would you guys say that Ahmad Bradshaw got cut from the Giants because he was making too much money, or because of his health and the availability of David Wilson?
Will, can you translate for us?
Yeah. What was Ahmad Bradshaw? Was he cut because of his contract or because of his physical situation? And what does he have going forward? And also because David Wilson is pretty good.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things. The most unemotional general manager in the NFL, east of Ted Thompson, is Jerry Reese. And Jerry Reese believes that you're paid for what you're going to do. I don't pay you a dime for what you have done. And so I think Jerry Reese's whole philosophy with Ahmad Bradshaw, with Chris Canty and the other decisions that they've made, the OC Manure not re-signing and all that, I think his whole decision is, what have you done for me tomorrow? Not what have you done for me lately, and certainly not what have you done for me last year. They can't trust Ahmad Bradshaw to stay healthy. He was the 255th player picked in the draft, and I just believe that Jerry Reese has confidence in his scouts to go find him a running back. Good question, though, Macy. What do we got out in the crowd?
We've got a question from Brad.
I realize what Bob said before about the Colts maybe regressing with a better roster. I'm a Texans fan living in Indianapolis. Can someone on the stage please tell me why I should feel good about this team going forward?
You mean you have no faith in Matt Shaw? Let's ask Mike Tanier to answer that question.
can't come up with any great reasons to feel good about that team. I think that your instincts about Matt Schaub are correct. I think you've seen the best of him. I think you've seen, unfortunately, the best of a lot of people on that roster. The overall roster age is high when you look on the line, when you look on the defense. So what you've seen moving forward is the best defensive player in the NFL, and a lot of guys who peaked as a division champion that kind of can't make the next step in the playoffs. And I don't think their cap situation is very good. Is that correct? I'm getting so what you're hoping for is to sustain this peak right now and to get that little bit better. And I don't know if they're in a position for free agency or draft, where they're drafting to get over that hump. And so I wish I had better news.
Got a question out here from the crowd from Tony.
Yes, do you think there's a possibility of them moving the draft around to different cities?
The NFL keeps threatening that, and I think at some point they might do that, because let me tell you something. If the NFL could make 10 cents more by moving the draft to Savannah, Georgia, it'd be in Savannah, Georgia tomorrow. And it's the same thing with moving the calendar. Let's have Albert Greer check in on that, because he knows a little bit about the NFL's desire to basically move the calendar, to move a lot of things back to maximize the attention for it.
Well, I'll start with the combine question, the idea of moving it around. Now, that's something the NFL wants on the table, but I talked to the people who ran the combine last week about it. Most of them think it would be a complete disaster if you did that, because of the medicals. Because the medical part of it was the number one thing. And they polled all the NFL teams. They said the number one thing that every team wants to get out of this is the medical. The number two is the interview. And last year they performed, I think it's 350 MRIs on 330 players in a 4-day period. The people at IU Health have that down to such a science. And I'd imagine, now the league can do whatever it wants. That would be the biggest thing that they get pushback from teams on.
What about moving the draft?
Moving the draft can happen. Yeah.
It can't happen.
It can't happen. Moving the draft can happen. And I think that the idea of the calendar changing, what the NFL wants to do, and I talked to Eric Rubin about this last week. He's their executive vice president of business, and he basically said what they want to do is they want to create a continuum in the calendar. So it just never ends. And so when you come off the Super Bowl, you've got regional combines going on, and the regional combines could eventually be, as they are now, they're qualifiers to the super regionals. They could wind up having at-large spots for the Indianapolis combine. And so guys will qualify through an American Idol model. I know Adam reported earlier in the week on the idea of them moving free agency back, moving the draft back. The idea is to try and pack as much into that time from the end of the Super Bowl to the beginning of camp and make it so people are never not paying attention to the NFL.
Will, what do we got out there?
I'm going to jump in on this. Bert's absolutely right about the medical part. There is a lot of movement in baseball to have a combine, much on this model. And if they have a combine, it will be here. And it may start as early as next year. So,
what time of year would they have that combine? Like May?
No, they would have it in June, just before the draft. It's conceivable that the draft would be moved here as well. Because, as he said, IU Health has this.
Because you live here, isn't that true? But they're going to move the draft here because they want to honor you?
That is what's holding Bud Selig up right now. But let's get some questions. We got one from Louis right here.
Thank you. First of all, Peter, thank you for having this event for us, and I want to thank all the gentlemen.
I didn't do anything other than show up, but you're welcome.
Thank you. My question has to do with the Thursday night games that are becoming so prevalent now in the NFL. As a fan, I kind of hate them just because I think it's such a short turnaround for all the players to play on Sunday and then have to make them go again on Thursday. But it seems to me like the logical solution, with all the teams coming off the bye week every week, why don't they make it a policy to schedule 2 teams coming off the bye week to play on Thursday night? Have you guys heard of any talk of implementing such plan?
Adam Schefter, what have we heard?
Honestly, it's too difficult to do because what do you do in week 2? You give somebody a bye so early in the season. Nobody wants a bye in week 2. Then another team that gets a bye in week 15 or 16 right before the playoffs. That's like getting a bye. So there's a lot to it. But the one thing that I can tell you, to your point, is that there's no player and no coaching staff in the league that likes playing on Thursday nights.
I will just make one point about this. I remember in 2011, the Green Bay Packers were going to have a Thursday night game, maybe the first Thursday of December. And I remember Mike McCarthy told me that he and his players were happy about playing it. I said, why would you be happy about playing it so late in the year? He goes, our players, if they're going in the locker room, they're excited about having a mini bye after that, because late in the season, he said, he will give them off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. They'll come back to work on Tuesday. He said, they'll fly out somewhere Friday morning after the game and go somewhere and have 3 or 4 days off. So I would agree that players are, I think, 92% against it. But I also think that until the NFL gets statistical evidence that injuries are up with Thursday night teams, I don't think they're going to eliminate the game at all.
Got a question here, Peter, from Ann.
Peter?
Hi, Ann.
I'm over here.
Hi.
Yes. I believe I asked you this question last year. NFL in Europe. There's another game next year, Wembley. What's the potential for the NFL to, or do they have a desire to expand in the UK or in Europe?
The question is, does the NFL want to expand to Europe, and do they want to put teams, a team or teams in Europe? I think that there are some owners who are very, very bullish on this idea. Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots, Daniel Snyder of the Washington Redskins. There's a lot of people who view the NFL as the ultimate profitable business, who want to put a team or more than one team in Europe. The whole question is going to be over the next, I think, 3 or 4 years, what will be the acceptance of a mediocre to very poor franchise, the Jacksonville Jaguars, when they play games there every year? Will they sell out? Will they get some sort of following? Will people be happier about it? Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, privately wants to play 2 games a year in either London or 2 games in the British Isles. So I believe that if they go through the next 3 or 4 years with a lot of enthusiasm for this, I think you're going to see teams propose having a permanent franchise or franchise in Europe. Albert Greer's done a lot of reporting on that as well.
And the one thing I could add is that internally, what the NFL has told, the teams and the executives and everything else, people who've been working on this say that we need to get in the top 5 popularity in the UK. Now you're talking about cricket, tennis, golf, soccer. It needs to be in that group. And right now it's 7th or 8th. And so they can do what they want. And there are some owners that are highly motivated to go over there because domestically the thing's grown to the point where it's been very difficult for it to grow at the same rate. And so going overseas is one answer to that. The question is whether or not they're going to be patient with it and wait to get in that top 5. They're going to have to jump over some other sports over there. They're 7th or 8th. And internally, what a lot of people believe is they need to get in the top 5 to justify it.
Greg Bedard of the Boston Globe was in Europe last October with the Patriots. What do you think, Greg?
Well, I had my doubts about it because there was absolutely no buzz in London during the week when we were there. But I got to tell you, the game day experience that was there, Wembley was sold out. It was spectacular. I had a great time. I was blown away. And, to your question about whether we're going to see that, yeah, we're going to see it. I mean, what the NFL really wants to do 40, 50 years down the road is have a European conference, an American conference, and have a true world champion. I mean, that's what they want because they want to keep growing the game and making money. But if I'm talking to people over there, I think it's very important when the NFL does it. I don't think it's a question of if. I think it's a question of when. Is that they do it right and they don't get overrun with the ego that they have. Because the ticket prices were very high for that game. It's one game. you try to ask people to do that for a whole season, I talked to a lot of fans over there, they're not going to do it. They would be very smart to make it very affordable so people bring their kids with them. That's how you're going to grow the game. But I think it can work over there. They just have to make sure they do it very smartly.
One of the things to keep in mind over there, there's two things. First, Jacksonville is making very aggressive play. Shad Khan is very smart. But remember that Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams, is also the owner of Arsenal. We could have another Rams trade before too terribly long. I don't think that's ever escaped Shad Khan's mind. Let's see what we're getting from our friends at Google. Billy has a question from, I have no idea where Coughlin is, Billy. Tell us.
New York.
Yeah, I'm downtown. I'm in the financial district. I just have a question about Mark Sanchez and what happened last year with his contract extension. There's been reports that Tannenbaum wanted to give him an extension before he was able to have a good year so that he wouldn't have to pay him an even richer contract. I mean, what kind of negotiations go on between GMs and agents that he was able to sign such a lucrative contract? It worked out in his favor, but it's really frustrating for the average Jet fan to see him get paid as well as he is. I mean, he's a good guy, but he hasn't performed.
Adam Schefter, why did the Sanchez extension happen?
For a few reasons. Number one, the Jets felt that it made sense, it freed up cap money, and they guaranteed him money, but really didn't spend a whole lot more in the future. They also looked at a quarterback that had taken them to the FC Championship game a couple of times.
Yeah, but they
were risking anything. They didn't forecast him coming off this type of season and putting themselves in the bind that they did, guaranteeing the money and handcuffing the franchise the way it is now. I think that the agents probably pushed it. I think both sides didn't see a lot of risk. It was designed for Sanchez to basically have 2 years before the Jets had to make another decision on him. It didn't work out. It just didn't work out.
Okay, I have a second question for the draft guru as well. Concerning what do you think of Mike Catapano out of Princeton? He was projected 3rd or 4th round. He didn't get invited to the combine. I played high school lacrosse and football with him, and I'm pulling for him. What's anyone status on him? He's probably the highest rated Ivy League player.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name of the player. What was that?
Mike Catapano. He's a D end. He's from Long Island. He's from where I'm from.
I can tell you that I keep a database of 500 players who I scout and grade throughout the year, and unfortunately, he is not on that database.
Okay, we weren't sure. I played high school football with him.
He's going to be an 11th round draft choice.
There you go. So I'll be honest with you and say that I hope he uses that degree.
Yeah, it's not a bad one.
I'm out here in the crowd now, and I want to ask Bob Kravitz one more question about these Colts. It almost seems incredibly fortunate that the Colts picked, 2011 to win 2 games so they could get Andrew Luck. What is the sense, do you think, in the organization about whether there's going to be a Peyton-like run with this team? Or is there as much confidence that you sense in a guy like Luck as there was with Manning when he first got here?
Well, I wasn't here in '98. I got here in 2000. So, I can't go back like Mike Chappell can. But there is the sense that they've got their franchise quarterback that they can reel off a couple of championships. Absolutely. There's, and I think they're going to build. But I think they're going to build around Andrew differently than they did with Peyton. I think with Peyton, all their first rounders were skill position guys. I think this team is going to try and be more balanced. They're going to try to take some of the pressure off of Andrew. This draft, I would think they probably look at now, to strengthen the offensive line. But I listen, talking with Ryan Grigson and Chuck Pagano, I get the sense that they think that they can put together a couple of titles with this kid because I think they think he's that special. I think he is too.
Mike Chappell, you were here. Tell me, how do you sense the organization feels right now?
We have to remember when Peyton came, the Colts weren't very good. It's kind of funny. Andrew Luck,
this just in.
Breaking news. We went through. It's funny whenever people were bitching and moaning about Peyton Manning not doing this and not doing that and get rid of him. I had to sit and get save on my computer that brought up the quarterbacks before Peyton. You know, and again, with all due respect to Jim Harbaugh, Jack Trudeau, Jeff George, Mark Herman, a long list of guys. So really the expectations were sort of high, but not off the charts. And now you've got Andrew Luck, who's trying, he has to replace one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, who's still playing. And let's keep in mind, folks, at some point early next year, Peyton Manning returns to town with Denver. You think there's been much of a buzz on that game? I think there is a buzz here because
the game's in Indy, right?
What's that?
It's Denver at Indianapolis.
Yes, I'm guessing maybe that's Sunday night open. You think NBC would like to have?
I'd like to see that game. It'd be good on our network.
There you go. And again, it's just the groundwork is so different because again in '98 we were coming off some really bad years, and you have to be bad to draft a quarterback like that. But with Andrew Luck, I think again, like Bob said, if they're going to do it the right way, and again, I think the expectations are that in the next 12 years, if they would have a couple of trips to the Super Bowl, that it's been a waste. So expectations are higher, I think, than when Peyton got here.
They sure do know what years to suck, don't they?
I'd like to know where Jim Irsay, the football gods that he kind of sidled up with, because things had to fall into place in '98 for Peyton to be.
Well, remember in 1997, when Peyton chose to stay in, he could have gone and played with Bill Parcells with the Jets.
Well, that's what I mean. And when you talk about the synergy, the last game of '97 is when the Colts went to Minnesota and Jim Harbaugh was their quarterback, and he just got beat like a rag doll. The Colts lose, and then Howard was out in Arizona, Denver in Arizona. Things had to fall into place, along with Peyton staying in. And then you have your bad year, the 2-14 without Peyton, and you're for the first pick, and who's there? The next Peyton Manning. So, Jim Irsay, he should have his quarterback in place for 25 or 30 years, which that just doesn't happen.
It's amazing.
Hey, Peter, one of the reasons we do this thing is for the fans, and there is no better reason to do this than Charlie McGann. His dad brought him tonight. Charlie wants to be a sports writer. I'm sure all of you will discourage him greatly. But this is Charlie McGann.
Will, there's a lot of money in sports writing.
Absolutely. If everybody would give Charlie a little bit of encouragement, thank his dad. And we have a couple more people to bring up. We'll rotate our illustrious family.
Yeah, and Will, Adam Schefter was good enough to come tonight, but he's got to leave. So let's bring Sean Jensen, if we can, up, and he will...
we'll bring Sean, and I know we have Chris Burke from SI.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming, Adam. Thank you. Come on, Sean.
All right, let's get a quick question. Do we have another one ready from Google? Yeah? Let me, as they're rotating, come back. I know we had a question. Right, where were we? Let's get a question from Tyler.
How's it going, guys? I have a question about Greg Jennings, who's apparently asking for around $14 million. How much do you think he will actually get? And where do you see him going?
Wow, how much could you have made, Sean? Adam Schefter's phone, how much is that worth on the open market?
I think I could have sold it for about $2,000. I cloned it in 0.5 seconds.
Awesome.
Oh, the rumors we could start with that thing.
What do we got, Will? Will, how about another question up? No.
We just had one on Greg Jennings.
Wait a minute, Mike 6.
We got a Greg Jennings.
I got one.
Greg Jennings.
I think Greg Jennings will get $14 million. There you go.
Yeah. Anybody else on Greg Jennings?
There's no way Greg Jennings is getting $14 million a year.
I just think that, though, and Adam touched on this earlier, the supply of the free agent market this year is going to so outweigh demand. And I think we're not going to see as many first-day signings. And there are going to be a lot of guys who are going to slip through the cracks. Who are going to have to make decisions on whether or not to take a one-year deal and try to hit it again next year, or take less than they want. There are too many guys out there. There are too many rookie GMs who don't want to spend, who want to go through the draft. Some teams are going to have to spend because the limits are going in, the floor is going in this year. they're going to have to start to get their books right. But, you know, people mention Cincinnati as a team that's going to spend a lot. They've got to take care of Geno Atkins, A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, Michael Johnson. I mean, they've got a lot of guys they've drafted. They're going to have to take care of them the next couple of years. So I think Greg Jennings is somebody who could get hit by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jennings is a guy I covered the Packers for 3.5 seasons, and I love Greg. He's a great player, but he's had a lot of injuries, and he's also going to be hit by the fact that he's more of an inside receiver. I mean, when you look at these receivers that get big money, they're the dynamic 6'3" leapers, X receivers on the outside. Jennings is, I mean, I think he's terrific, and I would want him on my team. But when you combine the injuries and that he's more of an inside receiver, it tips his value a little bit.
I've got a question out here from Troy. Thank you guys all for being here. Whoever wants to weigh in, great, but it might be of particular interest for Greg. What's the market looking like for Wes Welker? To a casual fan like me, it looks like his days in New England are done. Does anyone think our Colts are a possible fit for him, or with T.Y. Hilton settling into the slot receiver role, is this not even a good fit for him?
Houston! Well, yeah, with Hilton, I don't know if it's a great fit. I mean, but, you know, with Colts, I think that they can use a lot of weapons, you know, complement what they have. Even though I love Dwayne, I think Dwayne Allen's spectacular. He's one of the best young players that I saw on tape this year. I didn't even know much about him, but he jumped out. But about Welker, I mean, this is what I think is going to happen. I think the Patriots aren't going to tag anybody. I think Wes Welker's going to hit free agency. I don't, because of part of it is the saturation, I don't think there's going to be much of a market for him. And I do ultimately think he re-signs with the Patriots on a contract extension that is pretty decent and allow him and Brady probably to go out together at some point in time.
Okay, let's get a question from our friends at Google. Chase has another question. Let's call up Chase.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with the game evolving to so much passing and really that being the focal point of most of the offenses, where do we think some of the top running backs in this draft class will go? I'm a alum of the North Carolina Tar Heels, so really interested about Gio Bernard and wondering where he'll fall.
Will, translate.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. It was the next question. Michaela, what was the question?
Jake.
Where's the top running backs are going to go?
Where are the top running backs in the draft going to go? Let's go to Mike. Let's go to Matt. Matt, go ahead.
I think the top running back in this class is Eddie Lacy from Alabama. We all saw what he did in the national championship game. Really capped off a great year. I mean, anyone who's 5'10" and 230 pounds, and his trainers think he's going to run in the 4.4s, that's phenomenal. The thing to remember is this might be the first year in, 60 or 70 years where running back doesn't go in the first round, though. So it's definitely an interesting class. That position's been devalued a bit by the Arian Fosters and Alfred Morris type backs who can come in later. But Eddie Lacy would be probably your clear-cut first-round guy. Gio Bernard from North Carolina is an exciting player, a guy who left as a redshirt sophomore. His return kicks and punts, a little bit more explosive. Would probably cap off that second tier. But there's a lot of running backs, 6 or 7 of them, that all fit into kind of a second group together. We're all going to come off in the second and third round.
Lacy was really overshadowed most of the freshman.
Exactly.
T.J. Yeldon.
Yeah, T.J. Yeldon is a freak. But Alabama's becoming like running back you with Ingram and Richardson. And yeah, I mean, it's just amazing.
We've got another question out here from Andrew.
I just want to ask, what do you guys think of the draft this year? Basically, maybe the last 5 or 6 years about USC quarterbacks. I feel like they, each of them been overhyped in a sense. Mark Sanchez, Matt Barkley this year, obviously. And why do you think they have underperformed in the NFL?
Let's go to Albert Breer right now.
Well, I know there's a perception out there in the NFL that a lot of the quarterbacks who grow up in that area, in Southern California, are manufactured and overcoached and have kind of maxed out when they get to college. And fortunately for Matt Barkley, he fits the exact profile. He's from Orange County. He went to Modern Day High School, which is where Matt Leinart went, and a bunch of other high-profile quarterbacks, and he went to USC. Now, the thing that Barkley has going for him is that whole movie star perception that there is about players of that position from that school doesn't exist with him. He's going to win the interview. He is, across the board, everybody you talked to said he is a fantastic kid. The question is what you think he is as a player. And Matt, you probably better talk about that part of it, but I've just heard such wildly varying things. I had a couple of people, more than one college director, compare him to Kellen Moore physically, which is not a compliment. And then I talked to other people.
Wrong.
And then I've talked to other people who think he could be the best quarterback.
He's an interesting kid. Like when you guys get home tonight, you should look on YouTube because every week during the season, Barkley would actually do a film session and break down their game plan for the week before and be like, here's what went right, here's what went wrong. And that's the type of thing that NFL general managers just fall in love with. I mean, Russell Wilson was a similar type of interview last year, and we all hear now that the teams fell in love with Russell because of that. And like I said, there's questions about his game, and I think the opinions are going to be varied, but he'll win the interview portion for sure.
It's almost trending, maybe you can speak to this more, but I feel like it's almost trending the opposite direction as opposed to being Mark Sanchez who's overhyped, but now we're talking about Kellen Moore comparison.
Right. Well,
I give it a market.
The number one question, and this was asked in a draft meeting a couple weeks ago, where the college director stood up before they put that map up on the screen, and they said, what I want you to do is envision this kid wearing a San Jose State jersey. I mean, because he's been such a he was a super recruit. I mean, he was the only first kid ever to win Gatorade National Player of the Year as a high school junior. So this kid's been on the radar forever. And so that was the exercise he wanted the scouts to do, was envision this kid in a San Jose State jersey and tell me what you think.
I mean, he's a different player. You take away the USC stigma, and there've been all these reports that
Woods and Lee.
Right, Woods and Lee. And in 2011, he had an all-star offensive line, Matt Khalil, protecting his blind side. And he was a bit of a different player. There are questions about his arm strength. He doesn't have that top-end strength. He's been hurt quite a bit, and now he's got a shoulder injury that still hasn't healed. He still can't throw. And I think that only hurts his stock. But again, this kid literally could go anywhere from number 1 overall to the 3rd round. None of us have any idea right now where his stock is.
You're going to love the kid. The question is whether you love the player. And there's a lot of time for people to create things that may not be there.
First, I want to go ahead and thank everybody for coming out. We're not stopping, but I definitely want to thank all our friends, especially 1070 and Emmis for allowing us into their beautiful building. Our friends at Google Plus and Google Hangouts for broadcasting this to the world. Weber Grill, I know we've got a couple others. Friends at Sun King, just amazing stuff. And they've actually brewed this special King's Reserve Winterfest. And I think you're going to like that, Peter King.
Very pleased, thank you.
It's a good beer. It's a very good beer. And we'll continue with some questions here.
Why don't you want to go back out in the crowd and I'll ask a couple. I want to bring Sean Jensen from Chicago into the discussion. And Sean, I think the whole football world was stunned when Mark Trestman got the head coaching job for the Montreal Alouettes. Give us your sort of Cliff's Notes version of why the general manager of the Bears, Phil Emery, interviewed 932 coaches and chose the coach of the Montreal Alouettes.
I think that Phil Emery ultimately was looking for a head coach that was really going to focus on the coaching. He was looking for somebody that he could work closely with, but at the end of the day that he would sort of retain that power. And if he brought in a very strong personality, if he brought in somebody who maybe had some success and then eventually would maybe try to take over some of the personnel duties or have that final say that everybody wants, that would sort of box him out a little bit. And so Mark Trestman is a guy that's got a terrific NFL track record as an offensive coordinator, great working with quarterbacks, and in many ways he's very grateful to Phil Emery for giving him an NFL head coaching job that he's dreamed of for as long as he's been a little boy. I mean, he wanted to be a head coach in the NFL, and so I think that he really provided all those things. It ultimately came down to two candidates. It came down to Bruce Arians, and it came down to Mark Trestman. And I think that Arians, as I know the Indy fans know, is a very strong personality. And I don't think Bruce is the type that would ever make a play to make personnel decisions. I think he's a team guy, but one of the things that I did hear during the process is that Bruce had wanted to have autonomy on his entire coaching staff. And I think that when you look at Mark Trestman's staff, there are clearly Phil Emery's handprints on some of those decisions. And that's just another example of what I'm saying, that I think that Emery's the one who's holding most of the big cards in that deck. And, I mean, Joe DiCamillo, for instance, is a guy that Phil Emery worked with in Atlanta. He interviews for the head coaching job, and lo and behold, he's the second coach hired on the staff as the special teams coordinator. So I think that, and not to say that it's a poor selection, who knows how it's going to play out. I personally think it's either going to be boom or bust. I really don't see a middle ground. I think they're either going to go to the Super Bowl within the next 2 years, or they're both going to be fired within the 3 years.
I've got a question in here from Mike.
Gentlemen, I can't help feeling bad for Michael Turner and a little bit like Steven Jackson, how it seems like they were overused and kicked to the curb. Do players want this to be running the ball 35, 40 times a game, or are there any considerations in the future for agents to restructure contracts if they run 400 times a season and there's some type of incentive for them?
First of all, every running back ever wants the ball and thinks that they're the guy that they can carry the ball 35 times for 14 years. Every single one of them thinks they can do it, and only a handful in history have been able to do it. Teams know this, and that's why teams make these Ahmad Bradshaw, Michael Turner type decisions. But at every stage along the way in Michael Turner's career, if you tried to take the ball away from him, that was not a decision he made. Moving forward, will they do that? It's hard to say. It's not even just a contract thing. It's an ego and a personality thing. You don't get to that level unless you think you're somebody who can do what no one else does, and just carry the ball 380 times a year.
I think Michael Turner is actually an example of somebody who hit it perfect, who wasn't overused in San Diego, who did just enough to prove to everyone over the course of his rookie deal that he could be a bell cow. So he still had a lot of miles on him. He had a lot of. He didn't have very many miles on him, but he's shown enough to get somebody to commit to him in 5 years in Atlanta, and he has earned almost every. He's earned almost every down of that contract, which is rare for. I never blame running backs for holding out. What Chris Johnson did a couple of years ago, I wouldn't blame him. I don't think you can never blame players in that position for holding out.
Look at the situation with running backs. It's the second most famous guy on the team. One of the people you pay to see. Look at the catch-22 they're in. We just said a moment ago, they go in late rounds, so they don't get big bonus money at the beginning because the expectation is you can get somebody third, fourth, fifth round.
Then they have I think what happened is ever since Sean Alexander got paid too late. I think ever since Sean Alexander got 7 years, $49 million, when he was on the other side, everybody in the NFL has looked at that and said, the Seahawks screwed that up, and we're going to never go back again.
Look no further than Adrian Peterson. He's coming off major knee surgery. They've signed him to a monster contract. They had no intention to run him as much as they did this past season. They did it out of necessity. They did it because Christian Ponder was one of the worst starting quarterbacks for a long stretch of the season, and they had to give Adrian the ball in order to score points. They had no intention of having him coming off all those major surgeries to play and to carry the ball as much as they did. It really was the intention, as you saw earlier in the year, to have Toby Gerhardt kind of rotate in. So that's the running back position. Teams are going to do what they have to. If they have the luxury where they don't have to grind the guy and they can have him play out their contract, that's ideal. But at the end of the day, that position is sort of deemed as expendable, and they're not going to view the running back like they would view the quarterback.
We've got a question. Oh, sorry, you got something, Mike?
The Indianapolis, the Colts fans probably saw the transition up close. We went from the one-back Edgerrin James offense where Edgerrin was 350, 360, 370 carries a year, and he didn't want to come out. They ran the one-back offense, and it was Edgerrin. They basically used Edgerrin up, which, 6 years you get his carries, and then the transition, and since then it's been back by committee. It's been Joseph Bedard, Donald Brown, Vic Ballard, Delon Carter. Dominic Rhodes. Do we remember that one year where Kenny rushed for 100 yards for this team? So, the Colts have gone from that one bad worry now to the fact by committee. And one thing Bill Bullion always said when it came to running backs, you would rather get rid of a running back a year too soon than a year too late when you're paying him good money.
Carroll? Yeah, we've got to get a review on the barbecue from our friends at Weber Grill. Greg, how good is that?
Look at you. You're like Gene Rayburn to Art the Lemon. You can do two things at once. You can do two things at once. You can hold a tweet up, and you can also advertise for Weber Grill. You're doing a heck of a job. Well, we now have entered the period of the evening that is called the lightning round.
Lightning round.
Okay? The people either on Google Plus or in the audience can ask a question. However, the question can only be one sentence. Ooh. And I am going to keep the clock on everybody except for me, because I am all powerful. My answers can be 10 minutes long, but Greer's answers can only be 20 seconds long. At the end of 20 seconds, we all have to shut up and we go to the next question. Will Carroll, I'm counting on you to get the questions ramped up. One sentence questions. There will be no preaching. Do you understand?
We've got
the first preacher is ejected.
Well, we're going to start with us on the Google Plus, but I want to point out that Matt Miller just had a Bleacher Report intern bring him a beer. I think that's a foul of some sort.
I want my own intern to bring me a beer. Go ahead.
Here we go. We got our friend Chase. Chase, who rules on the lightning round. Start us off.
All right, this question's for Peter. Who is the favorite athlete you've ever interviewed?
Favorite athlete I ever interviewed is Brett Farrar. Won't that come as a big surprise? I'll tell you, the first time I ever had an extended interview was right after the movie Sling Blade came out. 3 hours at dinner, he talked like Billy Bob Thornton, including asking for the check in Billy Bob Thornton's. Next.
But you know my connection to Brett Favre, and my statement is, you know why he was number 4, Peter?
You know what?
You know why he was number 4?
Why?
It was descriptive. We got a quick question.
My question is for Matt Miller. Who's the starting quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs week 1?
Alex Smith.
That's an excellent answer. Will Carroll, let's go.
Will Peyton Manning get his second Super Bowl ring this year? Anybody on the dais?
Chris Burke.
If you're going to put me on the spot, then I'll say, yeah, sure. I don't know. It seems like he wants the crowd. I'll say yes. Play to the crowd.
Will, what do we got?
2 years ago, I asked who was the most overrated player in the league. The consensus was Donovan McNabb. This year, who's the most overrated player in the league?
Mike.
That might be good to go.
Use calculus on that.
I was going to say Michael Turner, but he just got cut.
Matt Shaw.
Matt Ryan.
Whoa! I'm telling Matt. I'm telling Matt. All right, Will Carroll, what do we got?
Right here. What are the odds that Ryan Dixon will go out and get an offensive tackle in free agency?
Mike Chappell.
95%. He said he would not really like to play a rookie right away. They need a tackle. They'll find their offensive tackle in free agency.
What position does Costanzo play next year?
Oh, I'm sorry. He plays right tackle. They'll find their left tackle.
We've got a question.
No, that's what he asked, but I wanted to make sure that was it. Will Carroll, let's go.
We've got a question from Google Plus from John.
Oh, yeah, me? Hey, this question is for Peter and Adam. What's the better football broadcast, Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football?
Oh, come on. Chris Collinsworth rocks. He absolutely rocks. Come on. I do like the group dog, but he's not very critical sometimes when he needs to be critical. Just my opinion. But I like him. I like those quarterback specials he does. Will, what do we got out there?
This is another Colts question for Bob. Will Pep Hamilton's system successfully replace Bruce Arians in the first year?
I think it'll keep Andrew Luck alive a lot longer. You know, I mean, Andrew's, 7-step drops and throwing the ball 25 yards down the field. I think long term the West Coast offense will be good for Andrew Luck and especially these tight ends. I think, I'm not so sure about the pistol and seeing Andrew Luck run the read option. I don't know how jazzed I am about that necessarily, but
that's enough out of you, Kravitz. That's 20 seconds. Will, what do we got?
We were just curious if you thought the charges or the offenses brought to Sean Payton from the Saints were just in the right actions that they took.
Hang on 1 second. I didn't hear the first one because I was yelling.
What were the suspensions to Sean Payton and the other Saints just?
No. In my opinion, Sean Payton deserved a 4-game, maybe 8-game suspension. I thought the punishment didn't fit the crime, although I think there definitely was a crime.
I completely disagree. I thought it was completely warranted. If they did not lie, if they came clean early, 4 to 8 games. The continued line, made it just for Goodell to suspend him for a whole entire season.
Michael Vick lied a lot worse than Sean Payton did, and he didn't get treated that way by the league office.
He did. Before the next question, I think what this was precedent for the first team-based HGH investigation. Here's our next question.
What round does Honey Badger go in the upcoming draft?
Well, that's a good question, Matt Miller. What round does Tyrann Mathieu go?
I'm not joking. I think it depends on how his drug test comes back here, and I think it depends on how his interviews go. I would say round 4.
Let me tell you, if he tests positive in this combine, I mean, he's not going to get drafted to play in the Arena League. This guy won't be very smart, but he'll pass it.
We've seen that. Everyone else is going to get tested here, and guys still manage to fail the drug test. And I don't mean to make light of his situation at all, but it's definitely a question that he has to answer.
Yeah. 2, Percy Harvin.
Go ahead and run failed drug test in college.
I can't hear him fail.
It's not unprecedented. Greg Bedard. Ted Thompson may be the only guy that considers emotionless a compliment. But I just have 2 words for the panel. Chip Kelly. Successful? Not? What are your thoughts?
We heard a moment ago about boom or bust with Mark Trestman. We're talking sonic boom or epic bust, and there's no middle ground.
I would disagree with that because, in my opinion, I think it so much depends on the quarterback. I think Chip Kelly will learn in the NFL that he can have the greatest scheme in the world, but if his quarterback stinks, it's not like you're taking that Matt kid. What's that guy at Oregon? I forget his name. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a good quarterback in the NFL, I just don't think you can hide that for very long.
Do you think kickoffs will be eliminated sometime in the near future?
Yes. No. Sometime within the next 6 or 8 years, there will not be kickoffs in NFL games.
Hey, do you think the Steelers' offense will be as schizo next year as they were last year?
Do you think the Steelers' offense will be as schizo?
That's exactly what you heard.
Schizo. Let's go to Albert Breer on that, the renowned Steeler expert.
No, I think Todd Haley is going to get things right there. I think some of the issues between him and Ben were overblown. Ben got too much ability, and the difference is going to be the young lineman. I think Mike Adams is going to come along for him, and David DeCastro is going to be a problem.
Who's the next college coach to make the jump to the NFL?
David Shaw.
That is.
David Shaw. He might not be the next, but he's the best. He's the best. He is, across the board, everybody, you don't hear anything negative about him.
What about the guy Sumner? Isn't he good? No?
He's really good, too.
No talk about Kevin Sumlin moving to Texas. I'm an Aggie, be quiet. No talk.
I think to Alvin's point,
No.
if the read option becomes more prevalent, you want to know who can stop it, it's David Shaw. Watch what Stanford did against Oregon. This is a guy who I think will be the answer.
He is, yeah. And he's got NFL experience, and that's what separates him from some of the other guys. So, I think David Shaw's the name when we get to that point in December next year when teams are getting ready to fire coaches. That's the guy you're going to hear. And then, under the radar is a stop call from here that NFL teams absolutely, positively love, but aren't convinced they can ever get to leave, is Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern.
We are now at the 5-minute warning, Will. Can we squeeze in 10 more queries?
If you guys had to guess right now, where does Reggie Bush end up?
We have to guess right now, Reggie Bush. I'm going to give that one to Albert Greer.
Detroit. He's going to be what Jim Schwartz wanted John Best to be. I give him to the Lions.
Very good. Next.
If the 18-game season is off the table, with the addition of a second bye week, no?
The second bye week is not a very plausible option. The 18-game schedule will only happen if 2 preseason games are taken away. And nothing will happen to the schedule this year. There's a slight chance that it'll be changed for next year, but I do not think the Players Association is going to accede to the 18-game schedule, fighting tooth and nail, even though technically the league can impose an 18-game schedule if they remove 2 preseason games.
Yeah, and they should resist that. Let's go to Mason from Google+.
Hi, guys. So my question is, what are my chances with Tim Tebow?
What was the question? Who's going to Tim Tebow vote? I didn't hear that.
No.
I believe it.
What are her chances with Tim Tebow?
Oh, what are her chances with Tim Tebow? I don't think they're very good. I don't think they're very good because, see, Tim is probably not going to be in State College anytime soon. He may have to relocate to Tebow now.
Hey, whatever it takes.
By the way, I do think Tim Tebow will be in the National Football League this year again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. James is Patty. Who is the one free agent that the Rams absolutely need to go after?
I don't think the Rams are going to re-sign Danny Amendola. And as Adam Schefter said earlier, I don't think they're going to re-sign. I don't think Steven Jackson is going to stay. I wish I could tell you who this is because I don't know. The Rams are going to go hard after somebody in the first day, 2 or 3 of free agency. And I hate to whip out on it because I would tell you if I knew, but I don't know who it is. I think they're going to be aggressive after one guy. I just don't know who it is.
Might be Mike Wallace.
Isn't their offensive line terrible?
I was gonna say, how about Jake Long?
Yeah, I mean,
reuniting with his team.
the Rams last year. I was blown away.
I totally agree with Matt. I think they're much more likely to go for a tackle than they are a receiver, even though they need a receiver, especially if they lose Amendola.
I would. Okay, based on this last year's previous season with referees and replacement referees, what kind of program has the NFL input to better build up the new coming referees that we'll be seeing?
Albert Greer.
Well, they're taking the referees off. They're taking a handful of referees off the field. The full-time refs are going to be working over the course of the spring. I'm trying to remember all this properly because there's a whirlwind there. But in the spring, they're going to have full-time refs who are going to work NFL practices. And those guys who are the full-time refs are also going to be responsible for helping mentor young refs. Eventually, the NFL is going to grow a bench where those guys are going to be worked in and developed for the refs.
That's enough. Next.
What position does Denard Robinson play in the NFL, and what team's a good fit?
Wide receiver, someplace that uses a lot of slot receivers who go into motion and run a lot of reverses and little slants. I'm not sure who that is.
Armonte
Eagles, I like it.
Next. Come on, Willie, you're slacking off out there. Let's go, Will. Okay.
I got one from here. With Bill Belichick's record, or bad record, of drafting wide receivers and DBs, is there any chance that he ever gives up personal control?
No. Bill will always have personnel control.
But there's no question that they have to get better at identifying wide receivers. I mean, they haven't developed a wide receiver since 2002 when they drafted Deion Branch and David Patton. I mean, it's pathetic, their track record. And they needed to change this year. I expect them to go wide receiver or cornerback, one or the other in the first 2 rounds. They have to get someone.
What's the likelihood Tony Gonzalez plays this year?
Oh.
Better. Much better. I'll take that one then. Okay, I think Tony Gonzalez is going to end up playing. I think anytime you see somebody that's hesitating, a lot of these guys have played their entire life. They have nothing else. Tony Gonzalez could do something. I mean, he could be one of those guys that makes it to the media pretty quick. But Tony Gonzalez loves to play football.
The Detroit Lions have some pretty serious talent in both offense and defense. What's holding them back from making the playoffs at this point?
Their culture deteriorated last year. I remember talking to the middle linebacker, Stephen, talking about this. He said, point blank, things have spun out of control, and we need people in this locker room to take control of it. What they miscalculated is they thought their young guys, their Dominican Sues, their Matthew Stafford, their Calvin Johnsons, were ready to rein some of the trouble guys that they were bringing in. Those guys just weren't ready to do it yet. So they need young guys to step up and become better leaders. There's talent.
I don't know. Still need some more defensive guys.
You can see they've got big, fast players everywhere.
What are the chances Indianapolis gets another Super Bowl?
100%.
100% for the win.
Who is the best quarterback from last year's draft class?
Down the line.
Andrew Luck. Is that really loud? Andrew Luck.
I think Andrew Luck's the best quarterback prospect since John Elway, so I don't think it's very difficult.
Yep. I thought Russell Wilson was the best. Saying luck because I don't want my car to be keyed.
You have a car? You guys can keep my rental car if you want. That's fine with me. Got the insurance.
What do we got, Will? What do you guys think about going to the New York area for an outdoor Super Bowl next February? What do you guys think about that?
I think we're all going to be stuck in traffic and freeze for a solid week.
You guys gave us a good preview this week of the weather, right? So we should all be accustomed to it by next year. I'm excited. We'll be fine for our next Super Bowl.
I like weather games. I don't have any problem with it.
I mean, I have a problem with weather Super Bowls. I mean, when they get to the Super Bowl, they're the 2 best teams. You shouldn't have, say one team is, a pass-happy team, and the other team is a ground-and-pound team. Why should weather all of a sudden give the ground-and-pound team?
I want to ask our 2 Indianapolis people, why shouldn't the Super Bowl be in Indianapolis every year? Every year. I mean, come on, dinner at Palomino every night? Come on.
Straight elbow. We've got a 24-hour steak and shake in the corner. I think they should revolve this, rotate this between Indianapolis and New Orleans, so we can just walk all week.
Now, I'll just say, somebody at the end of when the Super Bowl was here last year, they asked what you think of it, and I said, look, it was blessed because it was 65 degrees or whatever it was, the insanity of that week. But it's one of the most pleasant weeks I ever had covering a Super Bowl because you just walked everywhere. It was really a great thing. Now, Bob Kravitz, your thoughts about having a Super Bowl in Indianapolis every year?
I'm all for it, although it's a hell of a lot of work for us at the Star. I think it would be, I think it would be a great idea. I think we did a phenomenal job. I think they got all the details right. And if the weather sucks, you can always walk through the walkways, and you can get to every place you need to go with no problem whatsoever.
I completely agree. I think Indianapolis did an amazing job. We were set for the weather that never came, but it's not warm this weekend. If we had something like this, even if we had snow and the ice on Thursday night or Friday night, No big deal. Indianapolis should have it. I think we should be in the rotation.
It would be a combine game if it didn't snow sideways at some point. And it almost snowed sideways the other night. It sleeted sideways. Listen, I just want to, I'm going to speak for everybody up here on the panel. Just really thank you for coming by. I want to thank everybody who helped put this on. 1070 The Fan, Sun King, Weber Grill, Will Carroll. I mean, you guys, you know, all we did was just show up. You guys did a fabulous, fabulous job. We really appreciate the support. You know, we've had tweet-ups everywhere. We've had them at Victory Field. We've had them here. We've had them in bars. And, you know, everybody always comes out. And we just really appreciate, you know, that there aren't many people who love sports writers. And we just appreciate you guys loving us. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody up here. I want to thank Mike Chappell, Albert Greer, Chris Burke, Bob Kravitz, Matt Miller, Mike Tanier, Sean Jensen, Rick Bedard, Adam Schefter, who had to go, Doug Farrar, who's over there drinking a beer, and especially my friend Peter King.
Thank you, man.
I especially want to thank our friends. People already thanked Weber Grill and Sun King, our friends at MS and 1070 The Fan. I definitely want to thank you. We wouldn't do this every year if you didn't keep showing up. We'll see you next year.
Bob Kravitz, by the way, is going to be signing autographs. And you know what? They only cost $25 per autograph. They'll be signing right over there at that table.